All right, I think we can get started. So this is the fourth episode in our series here, sponsored by Maanas Technologies. Today we're looking at medical device software. Just a quick about us to start. Who's giving you this presentation? So Ionix is a technology company with a design-first approach. They basically work in Web3 solutions, fintech solutions, and health tech. So health tech and fintech are two verticals, and Web3 is one horizontal that crosses both. And about myself, you could read. I work in clinical product. I'm a physician. I've worked as a physician consultant at Accenture and worked as a clinical product manager at an EHR company. And I do consult for a lot of different companies and investors. And I'm leading the healthcare vertical here at Annex. So to start, it's kind of what is a medical device and what is medical device software and what is software as a medical device, which is a newer term that's been gaining popularity, and you'll see it written out like this, SAMD. So a medical device can range from anything from kind of like even a simple tongue depressor is a medical device, even bedpans in the hospital, and there's the simple versions, and then you can get something more complex like a pacemaker, which an implantable pacemaker that you'll put and things like that are also medical devices. I do want to make sure that we're not confusing with what we call DME, which is durable medical equipment. So these are medical equipment is like a wheelchair or crutches, if you need to be wheeled around. That's not quite a medical device, but it is medical equipment. So what is software as a medical device? We'll start with that one. The FDA has its own regulations, and there's also this group called the IMDRF, which is the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, and the FDA is a member of the IMDRF, so they have very similar requirements. But if you look at what the FDA says, they say their definition is software intended to be used for one or more medical purposes that perform these purposes without being part of a hardware medical device. So if you just think about that, it's something that does a medical purpose, one or more, but it's not part of the hardware medical device. So that means the software itself is the medical device, not the device that's being operated. We could explain that a little bit more in a future slide. But yeah, I'm not going to get into the IMDRF definition because it's very similar, but it's a little more complicated word-wise. But basically, they are very similar, and we'll look into that a little more. And finally, on this slide, we'll just say DME is, of course, durable medical equipment. That's the last point. But you need to understand how important software is for medical devices, because I feel like everyone looks at the device itself and believes that's what's going to diagnose or do the function that you're looking at. So but there's also kind of built-in software to those devices. So we'll look at firmware versus software. But an example is that software that, when you're using an MRI machine, you're using software to operate the machine. It'll turn the magnets on, right? For example, from the control room next door. But that's not considered software as a medical device. That the medical device itself is still the MRI machine, even though there's software controlling it. So we'll see those. And yeah, software is the backbone of medical devices. So obviously, when we talk about hardware medical devices, I have some more examples we could talk about. But if you look at Fitbit, if your Fitbit doesn't have software, it's just a bracelet, right? It's not telling you steps, it's not telling you time, but the health part of it is going to be, it checks your heart rate. You could always look at your heart rate. It's always monitoring your heart rate. I can look at what my resting heart rate is for the month, for the day, for the week. And so you can track these metrics. You can see how many steps I've done. You can look at a graph of it. So all of these pieces are the software. And yeah, the Fitbit is monitoring, your steps. It's got something that can even monitor elevation in a lot of them, so you can see if you're going upstairs, downstairs, elevation. But the software is doing a lot of that. And as far as the firmware versus software, it is that a lot of things will get to the hospital, and like I said, they will have a controller or they'll have something software based that is going to operate the machine or help use the machine. But the machine itself is still doing the bulk of the diagnosis or the bulk of the work. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more of what is and isn't software as a medical device. So it's really going to be if there's like an EHR. We did electronic health records in an earlier webinar. That is not software as a medical device. But if there's a piece of the EHR, for example, if there's some software that's tracking the size of moles within your EHR. So say you have a dermatology practice and you want to track the size of a mole over time, and you want to look at the parameters, right? So you want to see irregularity, color, diameter, things like that. And if you have software that tracks that and connects to your EHR, then you will have, that is a medical device, because it will track the size of the mole and helps determine the risk of skin cancer or things like that. And again, like I mentioned a pacemaker in the previous slide, the software that operates a pacemaker isn't medical device software. That's the medical device of the pacemaker itself, because it's just like has a function it does once it's installed, and it's going to keep doing that function. It's not going to, there's not software that's driving and saying what's going to happen in the pacemaker. It's the medical device is the pacemaker. So sometimes it might get a little murky, but I think I hope it's a little clear. And then integration of medical devices. So I think this is a big slide where we want to understand how medical devices will integrate into the continuum of care for patients. So the integrated workflow. So this will give the hospital an efficient, easy to understand workflow, because if all the sections of the hospital are connected, they can easily be controlled. So when you look at an integrated workflow, you really want to be able to do what you're doing, and the medical device comes along with it. That may be theoretical, because in the real world we have a lot of different issues that could get in the way of this. That could get in the way of this integration. There's a lot of different software standards, interoperability standards that we've talked about in a previous webinar as well. But this integrated workflow where the medical device isn't kind of off by itself doing its own thing, and you have to figure out how to incorporate that data or incorporate that into your patient care is obviously ideal. Device registration. This is something that I learned when I was on a project at a hospital many years ago. And I believe it was being done by FDB Health at the time, but I think a lot of other companies are doing this now. It's basically when you're in a hospital, there's a lot of different medical devices in general. And this isn't software as a medical device. This is just medical devices in general. And it's almost like an IoT, Internet of Things type function, where no matter what device is connected to the network, you will be able to almost have like a barcode system where every single device you could tell all the data about when it's operated, how it's being used, and things like that. And a device that hasn't been turned on or a device that's missing, you'll be able to categorize these. So having that integrated with your system at the hospital is actually a big deal, because a lot of these devices can also be very expensive, and it works out well for the hospital to have these all interconnected as well. Remote patient monitoring. Again, we had a previous, this was a topic on a previous webinar as well, but this is, monitoring the patient's vitals or other parameters. Like you could do continuous glucose monitoring and things like that. And the patient's not coming in. There is a device that's monitoring their glucose. We even have some that will, check check your eyes for diabetic retinopathy as well. I know Google Brain did something in like 2015-16 where they had a medical device that was basically like almost like a contact lens, and it senses very minute changes in your eye and is able to diagnose things much earlier than you would be by going into the doctor's office. So that was interesting. And the last thing, cloud storage. This is definitely taken for granted in most other industries. I think almost every industry has embraced and accepted the cloud. A lot of medical systems have as well, but there's still a strangely large number of medical systems that are stored on site rather than on the cloud. I think it's likely due to some bygone era of security where people don't believe that your health data is safe because it's on the cloud. But I think that notion is going away. But still, I do see a lot of like on-site, or people who are concerned about switching EHRs don't understand that the new generation of EHRs are generally cloud-based, and they're not going to be too worried about being on site. Unlocking the power of medical device software. So I guess, what do you really need to do in order to have a strong medical device? Right. So it is in the software side of it, which is where, of course, Ionix specializes. And I, of course, have worked in a lot of different medical devices from the software side. I haven't, tinkered in my garage and created a pacemaker or anything crazy. But the software behind it, how it needs to work into the physician's workflow, how it needs to send data, what data it needs to send. So, of course, HIPAA compliance is the first thing we'll look at. Everyone's always concerned about HIPAA. There isn't direct guidance on medical devices for HIPAA, but basically, depending on the population that you're serving, you need to follow the rules for HIPAA for that population. So if you're working with the hospital, you just have to use the hospital rules. Same thing with all the data storage and things like that. If you're working with health data, sometimes you may not be working directly with any PHI, which is protected health information. So you just need to view based on the population that you're serving and which kind of organization you're working with. And then sending useful data is a big one. This is something that I feel like a lot of these new kind of softwares and medical device companies aren't considering. Like, what data is going to be useful to the doctor or to the practice, the provider, the nurse, whoever's going to be looking at this data. I talked about this in a previous webinar as well, which is that, sending your heart rate for the last month isn't going to tell me anything as your physician. Like, I don't want to see a graph of here's my heart rate. Resting heart rate does tell me a little bit more about your cardiovascular health, like what it's been kind of trending. But again, like, I don't need to see like your heart rate for every day. I don't need to see all these different parameters. And we talked about glucose monitoring as well. Continuous glucose monitoring will obviously go up and down based on when you eat, because no matter whether you're diabetic or not, you will have a glucose surge when you eat food. It's just the rate at which it comes down. So yeah, I think it's you just have to make sure that what you're measuring and monitoring is going to be meaningful data. I feel like there's a lot of non-meaningful data being distributed because it may be cool or it may be like fun. But if we are looking at something that's going to help in the clinical care, so data that you're going to send your physician, you need to send useful data, and you need to think about sending useful data if that data needs to be used by your doctor, not just by a consumer. Interoperability, we talked about FHIR previously as well, but less than 5% of messages today are being sent in FHIR. So being able to think about what systems are using and how you can get your data, first of all, is your data useful? If it is, then you got to get it into the system. So I think that's another huge point. So once you decide kind of what problem you're going after with your medical device, then you have to make sure that you're sending useful data, and then you got to make sure that once you are sending useful data, the useful data is able to get into the system or get to the doctor or get to whoever the end user is that you want to be able to use this data. The last thing is choose partners wisely. I put this one in there because it's not so much a pitch for like using Ionics, for example, but this is really a pitch for, think about what your end goal is again. So we kind of work through these 4 steps. If you're making medical device software, make sure it's HIPAA compliant based on your population. Make sure you're setting useful data, make sure it gets in. And then it's, if you are trying to get into more hospitals, if you are trying to get into, if you have like a specific, if you're going after something in like the cardiovascular, if you're looking at cardiology, then you want to maybe talk to the ACC, the American College of Cardiology. You want to talk to, the correct practices, the correct doctors, the correct partners that are going to help you kind of progress in this medical device software journey. And then the big thing is to not kind of reinvent the wheel. So if your main purpose, is going to be something in cardiology, for example, and there's already something that does kind of an ancillary task of yours, do you want to build it from the ground up, or do you want to partner and get this other piece done? And your secret sauce is still going to be the main kind of cardiology piece versus working on, 3 different problems to solve your one. So I think one thing that, a lot of people get bogged down in is basically building all the software themselves. But there's a lot of things you could partner with others, even the interoperability, you can partner with people. And yeah, just make sure that you're not doing, extra work is kind of what I wanted to say here. And yeah, how we can help. Like I said in the beginning, we are the technology partner for health tech. We can do the full stack. I myself will be there to consult with whatever you need. And if it is, here you can see FHIR or HL7, some kind of interoperability standard, we can help with that. Refining clinical workflows. Myself being a physician, I'm definitely able to help with that and understand what the clinical workflows are. And we have a great network of doctors that we work with as well that we can get feedback from. Custom technology build. So we've built a lot of apps, including software as a medical device, and even, using kind of your microphone on your iPhone, for example. We're able to listen to your heart, listen to your lungs, and, there's software that we've worked with, that we've made, that is able to transmit that to your doctor, able to make inferences from that data as well. Not just plain audio file, but you'll have a visual representation as well, and you're able to see a lot more data, or your doctor's able to see it, which is the important part too. And then finally, yeah, software is a medical device expertise. It is, like I said, I'll be here for any kind of tech builds in healthcare. And yeah, anything that comes up, we're more than happy to help. And if you want to reach out to me, these are all my socials. I do want to make myself available, so I'll respond to anything that you guys send. And I think I'll leave it on this slide and check if there are any questions. But yeah, I think this was hopefully useful. Let's see if we have any questions. We have one question. Does the FDA regulate AI software? Good question. So AI software is still just software. I think a lot of AI is closer to marketing. We might do a healthcare AI talk later. But yeah, AI is playing a larger and larger role in health tech. You see, like even pharmaceutical development, looking through a ton of data. It's like, having a machine learning model almost, being able to look at. I feel like it's closer to big data than it is AI, but yes, there are things that that the FDA has already regulated, but it's not like a separate regulation. If it's AI, it is just medical device software. There is software that is smartly combing through data. They have a seizure monitoring bracelet, that's based on what environmental signals it gets. It just has like a model where it'll try to predict the seizure and things like that. But yeah, I will say that there isn't a distinct difference for AI software is what I'll say. How do you understand if your software meets the definition of a medical device? Is there any checklist to use? There isn't a checklist per se, but we could talk about kind of, there are a bunch of things that you can say. Good question. Thanks, by the way. There are a lot of things you can say for software. So software does need to be a general purpose on a general purpose platform. So the IMDRF definition, which I did skip because it's basically the same as the FDA, but the International Medical Device Regulators Forum definition defines it as software that may work on general purpose non-medical computing platforms, may be used in combination with other products, including medical devices, and may interface with other devices or other general purpose hardware and software that provides input to software as a medical. So it is a more convoluted kind of answer or a definition, which is why I skipped it. But yeah, you could definitely be able to look at your software, and if you need like a checklist, I can help look through one or provide you with one. But I wouldn't say that there's because if you look at the definition, it's based on a general purpose computing platform, which could be your phone or whatever. It's basically not based on a like hardware medical device. So if it's not firmware on your device, you are able to use it on your phone, for example. So your phone's a general purpose computing platform, and you could definitely look at all those pieces in order to make sure it's not a medical device. And even if it is a medical device, it's not like you see a lot of devices, a lot of like, I don't want to call them scams, but a lot of questionable medical devices that have like caveats of like not intended to diagnose or treat any disease, and people get away with that. But yeah, definitely, if you're looking to create a medical device or software as a medical device, you do need to make sure that you are meeting the definition. And yeah, like we can definitely help with that if you need. One more question: what are the regulations we should be aware of before software dev? I don't think you need to worry too much about the regulations before software dev. Again, if you look at kind of this slide, I think the regulation. I put HIPAA compliance in here more because people always ask about HIPAA, like regardless of if it's relevant or not. But it's just one way of storing your health data. A lot of people use HIPAA compliance as like a great marketing technique because it's the first thing people will often think of in health tech. So making sure it's HIPAA compliant is one thing. I think the more regulations, the regulations are very specific to your project. So make sure that you, like for example, if you're doing an electronic stethoscope through your phone, and your doctor's listening via telemedicine, which is a project we've done before. If that's happening, then you want to make sure that the correct patent filings are cited, because electronic stethoscopes have already been patented and filed since the 1970s and even earlier, I believe. So you just need to basically say, hey, we're the same as this device, so this device should be quickly authorized, and then once that's approved, then you have your own software which is going to be running that device, and the device is obviously like headphones or microphone on your phone, it's not like a full stethoscope, but you're operating as an electronic stethoscope, for example. So yeah, I think it's very specific to the project, but that is something that the company, as well as any of your partners, like I also said, choose your partners wisely. Whoever you're partnered with will hopefully be able to help you with that. And of course, Onyx, we can help you with that as well if needed. But yeah, I would say it's more specific. I don't think that there's going to be a specific thing for all software because, like I said, it is general purpose computing. So it could be anything. All right, I think that's all for this week. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.